Hey, welcome to our Sunday morning sitting group, everybody. My name is Trudy, and for those of you who may be new, a big warm welcome to you. We welcome everybody from all walks of life, all shapes, all sizes, all colors, all gender orientations, all the identities, the various identities are welcome here. And if you are new, I'll just tell you briefly what we do here is we meditate together, and that's what we do first, because everything we do after we meditate is then infused with more presence and mindfulness. Then I offer some teachings, and today I'm going to talk about equanimity and balance. Very hard to find these days, and even harder to keep our balance. And then we have some time for exchange with each other and conversation, which is definitely one of my favorite parts. So let's sit together. Find your comfortable sitting posture. I do a little bit of guided meditation at the beginning. And since we've been on Zoom, I find it's helpful to offer a couple of prompts throughout the sit. Sometimes it's a little more distracting to be meditating with others on the Zoom platform as opposed to meditating with others in meet space in person. But actually, we can tap into the group energy, the collective field of awareness that we create together online. And that's something that I've known it for a long time, but really been discovering since the pandemic. So if you're comfortable closing your eyes or just letting them close partway and looking down, it's just a signal to our whole being that we're looking within, that we're trusting the beauty that lies within. And I'll ring the bell to begin. And just listen to the sound of the bell all the way to where it fades and vanishes. You can take a deep breath in and release that breath, lowering the shoulders and relaxing the body. Once again, breathing in and out. Just letting the attention drop into the heart, the belly, the feet, inhabiting the whole body. And this kind of embodied practice helps us stay present, appreciating the aliveness of the body. feeling the sensations in the body that come with the movement of the breath. And simply relaxing into this moment, into the aliveness of this moment, knowing that this moment is actually the only one we have in which to be alive and fully feel what it is to be alive in simply being alive in your own being. And this simple posture of sitting up, and it's true if you're lying down too, the back is straight. It is really an expression of equanimity, of balance, sitting up straight in the midst of experience. In the middle of whatever is happening right now. Steadying the attention, resting the attention with the movement of the breath. Sensations in the body that come and go. The breath, the ebb and flow of breathing. The sounds of life around us appearing and disappearing, fading away. All this going on while we sit still. Thoughts and feelings coursing through the mind and heart. No problem. Not trying to stop thinking. Simply opening all the senses, awake, aware, of the totality of life. And thinking can be part of this awareness. While the attention is focused on all the phenomena of this present moment, breath, body, heart, and mind. Seeing without getting caught by what we're seeing. And when we do get caught, can be helpful to make a light mental note. Sadness, sadness. Planning, planning. Remembering, remembering. Restless, restless. Dreaming, dreaming. Whatever captures the attention and carries it away. Just making a light mental note of what is seen. In that moment of moving away from simply being present here together. And remembering too, you can always shift the body back ever so slightly. When you feel yourself tipping toward the next moment, anticipating what's next, simply bring the body back an inch or so, receiving the moment into this posture of receiving. Sitting up straight in this posture of dignity, receptivity, and balance. And if you happen to be lying down, even more receptive posture, receiving the energy of the earth beneath you and the sky above. Simply receiving this moment, life in the form of this particular moment in all eternity. Actually, Chris, could you tip it back up a little? Thanks. Um, that's perfect. So I was offering some instructions toward the end of the sit, forgetting that I had muted myself to adjust my posture. And I happened to open my eyes. I kind of peek at you sometimes while you're sitting. And I happened to see the chat that I was muted. So I was just kind of happily talking to myself while we sat. And I was talking about the waves of experience that come to us in this life. And so I'll just start my talk with that, because we live in a world where, we have just a limited ability, let's put it that way, a limited ability to choose what we experience. Experiences simply come to us like waves. And sometimes those waves are pleasurable, and sometimes they're painful, and sometimes they're joyful, and sometimes they're heartbreaking, and sometimes, they're just kind of little waves that, maybe some praise, some blame, nothing too serious, nothing big like success and failure. And I'm naming, those of you who know the Buddhist teachings, I'm naming what are called the 8 worldly winds, the things that toss us about emotionally in this life, and that we are really reactive to them unless we have practices like the practice of equanimity, which we will talk about and share some today. Just beginning, I'll talk about this next week too. It's so important, and it's one of the, the 7 factors of awakening. They're called the 7 factors of enlightenment or awakening. And they are actually very helpful to us they help us learn how to be with what's arising in our experience and how to keep our balance. And equanimity is actually sort of the pinnacle of them all. And they are divided into, I'll just tell you quickly, they're divided into 2 categories: the ones that are energizing and the ones that are calming and peaceful. And the energizing ones are joy and taking an interest in experience, really looking, investigating, being curious. And then also the energy or the effort that we make to show up and do our practice. And then right in the middle, there's mindfulness. It's like the fulcrum of a seesaw. And on the other side is tranquility, calm, peace, and concentration, being focused and present and still, and then equanimity. And so I was talking about being with these waves of experience, because I had a dream last night that I was swimming in the ocean and really enjoying it, but I had swum way out far from shore, which I don't do so much anymore, I have to be honest, but I used to. And I'm a little more careful these days. And I'd swum way far out, but it was a beautiful day. The sea was pretty calm, it was easy. I wasn't caught in a rip or anything, carried out. I had swum out. And then I saw on the horizon this rogue wave, this giant wave coming. And I was too far out to swim back to shore, which is part of why I stay a little closer these days, because big waves can come unexpectedly. And sometimes even in a set, if it's the wake of a ship or something. So I wish I could have said something really sublime when I saw it coming. But what I said in my dream was, oh shit, and I'm not going to have time to swim to shore. And so I just got ready. I thought, okay, it's too big to dive under, but I'll try. Really getting ready for this overwhelming experience. And then as the wave came toward me, it got smaller and smaller and smaller until it was just another wavelet, or maybe a little swell, but nothing that would break, because it was crashing as it was coming in. And I thought, this is really, in my waking hour, not in my dream, I thought, this is really interesting. This is sort of the way we dread so many experiences, that when we're actually in them, like taxes, okay, our taxes are due in a few days. If you haven't done them already, it's like taxes. I don't know about you, dreading, sitting down and preparing, and then actually doing it. It's not so bad. And this is true of so many of our experiences. And swimming this morning, I thought too about, why is it that everybody loves to just sit on the beach, watch the waves roll in, and stare at the horizon? I thought, what a beautiful metaphor for what we do in our meditation. The waves of experience just keep rolling on, rolling in, big ones, little ones, calm wavelets, cute little transparent, clear water ones, giant crashing ones come into our life. And then there's the horizon. We love to look at the horizon. Why? Because it is, it's got that evenness, right? It's level, it's even. And we can look out across that evenness into space, into a sense of vastness. And this is what we want to do in our sitting, to develop an awareness that is stable enough and balanced enough and impartial enough, really, to be able to hold that experience in our awareness without getting knocked over by it. Now, obviously, this is the ideal, because we get knocked over all the time. And then I thought, this is what nature provides for us all the time, these metaphors for our mind and how we train our hearts and minds to be in this life. And I thought, well, that's not going to work for the mountains. But it does, because why do we love going to mountains or being in the mountains, or in the Santa Monica Mountains we have so nearby? You can see vast space once again. And that space that we actually long for. We long for having that space to observe what's happening. One of the meanings of the word upekkha, which is the Pali word for equanimity, is to look upon, to observe. Another meaning is, and I'm not going to break down the word because I don't really know Pali, but another meaning of that word is to stand in the middle of things, to be able to sit up straight in the midst of experience, as I often say when we're sitting together. And this is so important, because the ability to observe our experience, that's really a power that we have, to be aware and to observe our experience. And it's a power that really distinguishes us from all the other creatures, at least as far as we know. And that power to be able to observe what's happening is what allows us to not get caught in what we see. And then mindfulness comes to the rescue when we do get caught. Mindfulness sees, oh, caught, and helps us regain our balance. this has been a great time of turmoil at InsightLA, as I was talking about last week. And it's been perfect for me to practice this practice of equanimity and balance, because I watch my heart getting sort of carried away with some reaction to something. And this happens. Being balanced doesn't mean that we're never unbalanced. I loved, and I've shared this with you before, I love Suzuki Roshi, the author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center. I love what he says about that. He said, life, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, his life is a process of continually falling out of balance against this backdrop of perfect balance. And that is the space of loving awareness, that backdrop of perfect balance. And yeah, we do. We're continually falling. My first teacher, Sansanin, used to say to us, fall down 100 times and get up 101. And that's your practice. And that was very encouraging, because who's not going to fall down? Who's not going to get caught? I'm sure there are times when our equanimity and mindfulness are so strong that we don't get caught. But especially when there's a lot going on, we do. And it's not a mistake. But this kind of equanimity, the kind that means looking upon things, is what allows us to have some patience and not necessarily take things so personally, even though they may hurt us in a way that feels extremely personal. But so often it's not personal. It's people doing what they need to do or say. And my friend Yvonne Rand, who was, she had a beautiful zendo in Muir Beach, a priest from San Francisco Zen Center. She always used to say, 98% of what people may say about you is really about them. And that was very helpful to me. That helped me have a little more equanimity. The classic example of equanimity is being a grandparent, because you've raised your own kids and you just don't, you're more unflappable. The things that happen in your grandkids' lives, you have more equanimity and balance, and you're not as attached as you are as a parent. So you can be, you're just less likely to get caught up in their big dramas. And then this other piece, the standing up straight in the midst of experience, and that comes from our capacity to have some inner calm. And to, the image I have is, these inflatable dolls that have sand or something at the bottom, so you could knock them over and then they pop back up. I don't know if people still have those. They used to have them when I was young. In Japan, they call them Bodhidharma dolls. So that we can be more like that. We're just knocked over and then whoop, we pop back up, because we have that ballast, that weight of our practice that's strong and stable and protects us from getting tossed around by the things that are happening around us and within us. It's not, not just around us. So this is a great power. And it doesn't mean being flat and kind of indifferent to things. That's not equanimity. Equanimity is actually a very warm-hearted feeling. It's a feeling of being fully immersed in seeing what's going on and knowing what's happening, while at the same time having strong enough mindfulness to not always get carried away by it. So my first teacher, I remember once in a talk, I was listening, and he said, and he was staring straight at me, and it was a small group in those days. These were early days, really, maybe it was around 1974 or something, before many of you were born. And he looked right at me and he said, "Don't make a line." And he said it so emphatically. And I thought, what is he talking about? Making a line. And then I realized he's talking about equanimity. Don't divide things into good and bad and react to them accordingly. Like, see if you can stay in the center. And this is so important when people are upset and when people are in their emotional reactivity. For us to be able to keep our balance, it helps everybody. It's like that famous Thich Nhat Hanh saying, if one person can, he was talking about the boat people who were refugees fleeing Vietnam in these unseaworthy, often, just boats, and people would panic. And he said, if one person could keep their cool in that boat, everybody in the boat had a better chance of survival. So we're in a boat that's tossing and turning right now in our country, in the pandemic, where we don't have any kind of clear leadership, and we are shockingly the country with the most deaths and the most out of control pandemic in the entire world. Our boat is really, I won't say it's unseaworthy, because here we are, right? We're at sea and we're doing okay. But it's a scary time. It's a scary time. And so for us to be able to not get so driven by our fear of what's going on, or our fear of what may happen, or get so lost in the grief and the losses of what has happened, the many, many things that we assumed would be happening at this time in our lives that simply aren't and can't happen right now. It's sometimes feels like losses piled upon losses, piled upon losses. And I'm not even talking about people who've actually lost their lives. And I don't know, but it seems like soon that number, if it hasn't already, like this just is it makes me wonder so much that if it hasn't already, that number will surpass all the people who've died in wars in our country. And this is a shocking, to me, a shocking statistic. And so the other piece that I just want to talk about, because it's relevant, everything's relevant for how we're handling ourselves and each other during the pandemic and the protests. Well, the protests aren't happening, but the issues haven't gone away. And organizations and nonprofits are being, roiled with explorations and demands for racial justice. And it's really a good thing that this is happening. It's a very good thing. However, often the people who've been most targeted and traumatized by racism, in a situation where they feel safe to express the feelings, then can unrealistically expect, one little nonprofit or company to solve this gigantic hundreds of years of pain. And it's really up to each one of us to take care of our trauma and pain, and to try, of course, to create situations that don't trigger that, but it is up to us to take care of our own suffering and to take good care of our own suffering. And that we need balance of mind. We need support, the support of our own back that can sit up straight or lie down if the back is compromised, as mine certainly was for a while after I broke my back. But we need the support of each other. And we also need to keep our balance in terms of not taking on too much of the suffering of others. What is the right distance to be from the suffering of your children, whether they're young or whether they're young adults or whether they're full grown? What is the right distance to be from somebody else's life who is suffering? And we can be, and this is where compassion and equanimity are so hand in hand. we have compassion for the suffering of others. We can feel it sometimes acutely and intensely in our own being. But that suffering of others, especially when there's so much of it all around us, it can too easily become our own and disable us as wise helpers or simply wise supportive presences. It can disable us. And that impulse to rescue, I know it so well from myself. I have to rein myself in all the time. That impulse to rescue can be really strong. And then I can find myself taking inappropriate responsibility for someone else's life. Like I have to protect them or take care of them or something. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. I can see Rand nodding, and I'm sure others of you are at least internally nodding. And so we lose track. Is it their distress or is it mine, or, you know, what is it? And so this is why it's so important to do this practice that we do together, because we learn how to work with our own difficult states little by little. It's only by developing the strength and endurance to sit through them, to remain with ourselves and not abandon ourselves while we're going through tough times, tough things, tough moments. And because how we work with our own difficult states completely determines how we will work with the difficult states of others. Whether we can be that wise and balanced presence that radiates love and support, and by keeping our cool, radiates that, transmits that, communicates that energetically to the person that is suffering, or whether we just start to drown in their suffering and react to it in ways that may not be wise, and certainly not for ourselves. So this is the other piece of equanimity practice that I want to share with you. And next week we'll begin with an equanimity meditation, actually doing the practice of equanimity. And actually, let's take, Ronnie's asking, how can we abandon ourselves? It's easy to abandon yourself. Every time you fly into emotional reactivity and lose your mindful presence, every time you, fly off the handle in any way or sink into despondency or despair, you have actually abandoned yourself, because those, those states, the steadiness and willingness to practice mindfulness, to try to find the right distance to be from our own pain too. We don't want to act detached and use the calm of meditation to deny what's going on. That's one way to actually abandon ourselves. But the willingness to work with our own stuff, to get close as we can to our own experience, is what helps us find the right distance from other people's pain, and allows us actually to get closer and closer to other people's pain without losing our balance. And this is important teaching for those of you who are carers or medical professionals who are responsible for the care of others. It's impossible not to feel their suffering, but it's also possible to develop some freedom of mind and heart within that. And I guess I'm also expressing a wish or a prayer that this may be so, especially for all of you who are taking care of COVID patients right now. Yes, daydreams and flights of fancy are another way to abandon yourself. Not being present is a good way to abandon yourself. Anyway, I would like to open up for some conversation and questions if you have them. And Ran and Kenny will unmute you so that we can have some exchange together. If you can use the chat function to raise your hand, it's easier than if you wave your hand wildly. And
in case anyone doesn't know, you click participants, and then at the bottom of that column, there's a hand. You click and it'll put you in order. So I have one hand raised. Adam, feel free.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. Hi there.
Hi.
Um,
Hi, Adam.
hi. Just as a quick side, I had one of those Bodhidharma dolls when I was about 7 years old. It was an R2D2 one,
Uh-huh.
and I punched it so many times. One time I punched it so hard it popped.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and the sand came out and fell on my floor.
Well, this happens. Sometimes we definitely lose all our sand. It falls on the floor.
Right. So I am here in Ajijic, Mexico, visiting my father who is sick with dementia and recovering from pneumonia.
Wow.
And uh, oh, uh, it's tough. It's straining my practice beyond ever. Like I've never had. I think what's up for me right now is that folks, it's as if there's no pandemic here. It's groups of people, folks are not wearing masks. And even in the facility my dad's in, his nurses are right next to him with no masks on, or the mask right under the nose. And so the care that he's getting, I'm a medical professional, so I'm an OT. So I see the posture, the seating, the transfers, all the things that are happening. And it's just this constant barrage of reactivity.
Yeah.
And I practice noticing it. I practice sitting with it, but it's actually, well, too much in some ways. And I think that, there's the type of fear that we have that is kind of irrational. And then there's a fear of there's that wise fear as well, right? The self-protective fear. And what is happening is I will see a person or a group of people coming towards me without masks, and I become fearful. I try to back away and I become angry. And I keep noticing that, but this happens, and in my dad's facility as well. And this happens hundreds of times a day. Yeah. I don't know how you were talking about equanimity and compassion. And I've been practicing metta for myself, metta for my dad, metta for everybody there. I still feel very, very reactive, and I don't feel compassion. I feel angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm having a really tough time practicing with it.
Thank you, Adam. It's hard. What you're describing is actually frightening and painful and really difficult. And and I appreciate that you're, loving and being with your father there, and trying to keep him safe as well as yourself. And the phrases that we use with equanimity are things like, this is how it is right now. This is the way things are. And those phrases, they remind me of the 12-step program, where you have to admit your powerlessness over experience, that we don't choose our experience and that we are powerless to control others. You see that so clearly where you are. And so what to do in that situation? You're offering metta. It may be that you need to give your anger a little more room and let yourself really be angry about all of this. Angry that your father is sick with dementia. Angry that he got pneumonia. Angry that he's so far away that you need to go far to be with him. I mean, I don't know. Do you live there?
No.
No, right. Angry, just let yourself be angry and let the feelings be there. And you can work with them without trying to make them go away, because it never works. That's what we're usually trying to do when we apply practices to ourselves and to our feelings in order to get rid of them because they're painful. And it doesn't work. What works is the painful part, is sitting while you're boiling with anger. Sitting while, and trusting that if you let yourself fully feel your feelings, it will not last forever. We know this. And it will actually morph into some self-compassion. And out of the self-compassion comes actually some real compassion for everybody. Forgive them, for they know not what they do, that kind of compassion. And so there isn't really a solution in terms of fixing, but there is a way to be with the mess that you feel that you're in right now, with a little more balance. And so it might sound counterintuitive, like let yourself feel the anger, but if you do it right now, like just tune into yourself for a moment and just feel the anger that you have about this situation. And where do you feel this in your body? Just tell me out loud.
Yeah.
Tell me what's happening right now. But stay with it. Stay in your, good. Stay with yourself.
I feel it in my gut. I feel it in my solar plexus and my stomach. There's sadness there. There's a lot. There's so much sadness there.
Yes.
It just, I can't.
Can you let yourself feel the sadness? And this grief that you're feeling, Adam, is real. But it really needs to be felt. And I think it would be really great if when you're alone, you can start with the anger, because anger is usually a front for grief. Mm-hmm. Sometimes sadness is a front for anger. Women often will cry, but they're really angry, but they've been socialized, not to be angry. But so the anger is because you're sad and you care so deeply. The anger and aversion to what's happening is actually a form of compassion. You want it to be better than it is. You wish it was better than it is. That's a compassionate wish. So when you acknowledge your powerlessness, as Clark is pointing out in the 12th step, you're actually invoking a power greater than yourself. You're invoking whatever that is for you, God, the universe, spirit, whatever form that takes for you. And you're placing your heart in the lap of the Buddha. You're placing your heart in the lap of the universe. You're placing your arms around yourself and holding yourself and letting yourself feel what's happening, because it's very intense. And it's paradoxical, because the emotions we're always trying to avoid, when we feel them this way, it becomes quite comforting. So practice like that for a little while. And I hope we'll see you next week, and we'll do the actual equanimity practice too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Chris next, and then Rick wrote a question in the chat, so we'll do that after Chris and then Catherine.
Oh yeah, I saw Rick's question. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
Unless you want to handle it first, Judy, Rick's question.
Yeah, I'll just handle Rick's question first, since I saw it, and then you can unmute Chris.
Okay.
So Rick's question is it possible for anyone to arrive at a state of now in which our pasts play no role whatsoever? And yes, it is possible, but not in the way you think, I bet. I don't know what you're thinking, but the way that it's possible to not have our past in charge of us is to know our past really well and to be able to see and have and develop strong mindfulness, Rick. Because the strong mindfulness allows us to see when we are being driven by reactivity, by emotional suffering, and when that emotional suffering is familiar to us. Because when it's familiar to us, it's always from the past. When, you know, that we've been there, done that, we've been there before, right? And usually we've been there before since we were children. Not always, but the traumas and the experiences of the past that mark us, will they ever not come up? I don't know. In my experience, they come up, they do. But how quickly I see it and how compassionately I understand it, that has changed completely, so that I can truly say that the past is not in charge of me and my life, if that makes sense. So will you unmute, Chris? You're still muted, yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
thanks. The meditation and the talk were just so beautiful. Yeah, the first question was just really great. I probably got about 1,000 times more than I came for already. And I know this isn't the calendar section of the Times where it's Ask Trudy, but I'm 61. I'm recently out of a 35-year marriage and 40-year relationship 8 months ago. I'm also kind of just out of a kind of a recent intimate relationship, romance, not a physical relationship, but an intimate relationship. And, you know, there's the pandemic loneliness and isolation, which, you know, I'm a music producer and always with people and always creating. So this has been an intense 4 months in that regard, because it's just been cut like it has for all of us. But then there's this piece of everything in my life having changed. Everything I do, friends, you know, just kind of the whole thing, which I'm so grateful for and so open to. So I had this really interesting, amazing, beautiful friendship with this woman for a while, and I'm not missing anything that happened. I'm grateful for it, but I find myself, you know, trying to stay present and be in the moment. I just got this book yesterday, If the Buddha Dated, which is really powerful. But it's really,
what's her name? Charlotte Castle's book.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually a good book.
It's Buddhism light, so it's perfect for me.
Yeah, you know, it is, but it's good.
So this suffering, and I'm someone who didn't feel most of their life, and now the floodgates are open, and you know, you've already addressed that so beautifully. But I'm suffering because of attachment, because of clinging, because of what could have been, and longing, and all of these things. And then that combined with the loneliness of not connecting with people and having so much change in my life. And I know that the answer is probably pretty simple, but I just, you know, I know this isn't dating advice or anything like that, but
it could be. It's just that you're not dating right now, so I can't give you any dating advice.
But it's really just, I want to be free from this, and I want to live with joy and presence and happiness, and kind of do whatever I can to accelerate this process of just kind of moving forward. So, and I know that that's a small question in light of so many of the things you brought up, but it's just, my suffering is real.
And I'm going to answer it. And I do remember your history, because you talked about that once before. I'm so glad you reminded me. And I also want to thank Adam for really, kicking off a great conversation. So the equanimity practice, when you are the way you are, is actually, this is not what you're going to want to hear, Chris, but it's actually accepting where you are, and not in the sense of getting depressed and resigned, but really saying to yourself while you're meditating, this is how it is right now. This is the way it is. This is the way things are. Because what you're really talking about is, how can I stop fighting with reality? And it's paradoxical, because the more you are willing to accept, and I don't mean in a sense of resignation or depression or just caving in and, you know, getting all, I don't know, compressed and suffering. I mean, one time I was waiting to see this woman Zen master. She was the first one to be made a Roshi in the West, Kennett Roshi. This was, oh my gosh, over 40 years ago. And she was a woman, and I wanted to meet her. And I made an appointment. I came to her Zen center, her Zen place. And I was told to wait in the kitchen. And I waited in the kitchen, and I waited in the kitchen, and I waited in the kitchen. And after about half an hour, I started to get really restless. And I noticed there was a calligraphy over the doorway. Beautiful calligraphy. It said in English, "Acceptance is the gateless gate." In other words, the gate you can't see, but the gate that you can walk through into a different room of your mind and heart. And I just kept staring at it because they never came. And finally, after an hour, somebody came and said, "Oh, Roshi won't be able to see you today." Okay, you know, you're a Zen student, you accept these experiences. You've just been sitting outside the monastery in the snow waiting. But during that time, I had nothing else to read or contemplate because it was before devices. But that saying, acceptance is the gateless gate. And it's really true. So it's not the answer you probably would have wanted, but try it out. Try it out.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Catherine Sarvia.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, but for some reason, Ran is coming up in the speaker view. Would you say some more things?
Hello.
Yeah, there you are.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask you, like, because we're talking about processing anger, and also like compassion towards self and then compassion towards others. Like, what about when your anger and your practice kind of from that it urges you, or about, like, what do you think about taking a stand, like, or standing up against something that is kind of oppressive, or like when you, as a kind of result of processing through your anger and being like, okay, enough is enough, I'm going to step up and speak out.
Important. I think it's really important to be able to do that. Really important. And you just said it, you've sat with your own emotions, or you've gone to therapy, or you've done whatever you do, talk to a friend to process your emotions.
Come to insight.
What?
Come to insight.
Yeah, you've come to insight, you've processed your emotions, and now you see that there needs to be some wise action.
Yeah.
You see, but the action will be coming from a place of more balance and wisdom than if you had just reacted. You're going to act instead of reacting. And that's important to do, because sometimes you need to protect yourself or defend yourself or stand up for yourself. Sometimes you want to stand up for injustice because you see it happening and you can't just sit there.
Yeah.
So those things, that's a great question. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome. Also, I think that in our culture, I think there's a misunderstanding of what compassion truly is. And so when you're saying, like, me standing up and saying, no, that's enough, like, that is an act of compassion, but people think that you aren't being compassionate, that you're being reactive, or that you're, but it, I mean, it, in this situation.
One meditation teacher responded to that very, very often asked question by saying, you can be open to the train without standing in front of it. You know, and that is really important, because people might say you're not being compassionate, but it's the ultimate it's very powerful compassion to take care of yourself and protect yourself. And it's also very powerful compassion too to protect somebody else from hurting you. They're not going to take on that really negative karma, of
Yeah,
hurting you in some way. So you're
Totally.
protecting both of you.
totally. Okay, thank you.
And that same teacher who talked about being open to the train, you don't have to stand in front of it, said when you just practice openness without any boundaries, that's called idiot compassion.
Exactly. Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you so much, Trudy.
Okay, Gabby.
Oh, yes. Hi. Good morning.
Gabby,
Oh, it was on.
can you mute yourself now, Catherine?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I think,
And Chris, mute yourself too. Oh yeah, you are.
my question has to do more with like when is this gonna stop, this turbulence, right? Because it's not the first time we've been around this. And to me, it's just concerning.
The best thing you can do to stop it, Gabby, is to work to get out the vote.
Yeah, definitely things are in my reach.
Whatever you can do to support getting out the vote. This is the best way to stop, because the chaos that we are in is due to a lack of healthy and wise leadership of our country, which other countries with all their faults are doing better.
Yeah, it just seems like we do things backwards here. Like, I don't know what it is. Like,
So that's
it
why
almost feels like we're in a video game world where like somebody else is saying, oh, now let's have this country against this country, or this. It's just been, it's kind of ridiculous roller coaster. And
So
it's
I
kind of
think
like,
that's why I think it's really important that we not have 4 more years of this. And I don't usually bring politics into it, but in terms of the pandemic, I can't help myself because it's so tragic. Lives are being lost unnecessarily, and that's murder.
yeah, I agree that each one of us can contribute somehow.
So
with
what,
what's
do
in
you
our
have
reach.
another question, Gabby? Because there's other people waiting to raise their hand.
No, that was the main one, because it just seems like I'm not sure with Buddhist practice and so forth, what is their point of view and perspective with the situations happening over and over again in the history of the world. This is not the first time.
No, it's not. That's
And
why.
so what does Buddhist practice say about that? Like, is that an ingredient in our human world? Like, we have to have that. We have to have that in order to be in this world.
The Buddhist teaching is that the reason that we have that is that people have not really freed their own hearts and done their inner work that they need to do. And so their inability to see clearly and to act lovingly and to be wise, it becomes global. It gets writ large across the globe. The Buddhist perspective is that you begin with yourself and you work on yourself, not to the exclusion of helping others, but you do work with your own suffering first and your own confusion. And so that's the teaching. And
Yeah, because that to me is a worse disease than the COVID-19.
Yes, exactly. Well,
that
exactly.
we don't have a vaccine for either. I mean, other than mindfulness.
I'm going to make room for somebody else now. I'm really
thank
happy
you.
to see you. Yeah, thank
Bye.
you.
Okay, thank you. Gabby's up next.
No, Gabby just spoke.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. So it's Ronnie Gross.
Hi.
Hi, Ronnie.
This wasn't my question, but I'm just curious. I agree with you about why the COVID all over the world, but I mean, how many people do you think are really going to get that? I mean, what if like the majority
Ronnie,
of
your question about you?
Okay.
I don't have any.
Okay. My question is this, really quick. If you're with another person and the person keeps doing the same thing over and over again, and you keep, like responding to it, and like sometimes you respond. I mean, how do you know when to just let go and not respond and just accept it, or you know,
Now, you do it right now. That's when.
even if you hate it, or if
Yes.
it does, you
Yes.
just have to like
Yes.
let it go and realize this is the way it is.
Yes. And the time to do it is now.
Yeah, it's not easy, but
No, it's not. This is not for the faint-hearted. Thank you.
thank you.
You know what I'm talking about. There's only now to do it.
Okay, Ranak.
Hey, Trudy.
Hi, Rona.
Hey. So, I had a question about something you mentioned. I thought was, it was really interesting. You mentioned anger and how, like, maybe if we've been conditioned for women to feel it as sadness. And like, I've kind of noticed, like, through this, these times, I've been feeling feelings of anger. And it's really interesting because before, I don't know if I allowed myself to feel those feelings, or I would immediately go to like, oh, what's behind this? What's behind this? And now I've kind of stopped and just like been like, oh, maybe it's just anger. If it's like anger at, something I read or some person or whatever. So what do you do with that? Because it's such a strong emotion. And like, if I don't want to overanalyze it and be like, well, what's behind it? Let me feel the grief and the sadness so I can let it go and just like let it be and hold it. But then like kind of, I guess, a fear of like reacting from a place of anger, because I've worked so hard to like not go there, through this.
Well, sometimes you'll react and get mad, and then you can say you're sorry. I mean, I don't think you can expect yourself never to get angry when there's so many things and we're under lots of stress. It's difficult. And I would work with you with it the way I worked with Adam, but I noticed I just saw the time and that we've come to the end of our time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just go easy on yourself, Rona, really, as best you can. And understand too that especially women have been socialized. What is it? Sugar and spice and everything nice. So, we've been socialized that it's not okay to be angry. And it is okay to be angry. It's just not okay to there's nothing wrong with anger, with the emotion. Where it gets us into trouble is when we act from that emotion and hurt people or hurt ourselves.
Right. The reactivity that comes with anger. Because it's such a strong emotion.
Exactly.
Right.
So thank you, everybody who spoke. And I think for the first time, we actually got everybody. And I had to be a little brief with people so that we could do that. But it felt important today. And so now let's just take a moment to absorb what we've done together and find your sitting posture. We'll sit for just 1 minute. As a way of expressing our gratitude and appreciation for having the luxury, the privilege, the great good fortune to have this kind of time together, to spend time studying the teachings and learning from each other and meditating, learning from our own wisdom. We express our thanks for all of this, all of these blessings. by sharing the goodness of our practice, by imagining, you know, like the prayer flags that the Tibetans are being told they can no longer fly, imagining the blessings and the goodness of our practice, just flying out all over the world on waves, ocean waves, air waves, every possible way. May we and all beings learn together more and more how to keep our balance, how to stay open to one another and to the truth of each moment so that we can grow in wisdom and compassion. Unmute everybody, please. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
I will see you next week.
Bye. Have a good
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Have a good week,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have a good
everybody.
week.
Wear
Thank you,
a good
Trudy.
mask. Wear your
Thank you.
mask.
Bye.
Nice talk.
Next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Sarah.
Yes.
Kenny, will you stay on for a moment? Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Judy. Bye, Nisa.